from humble beginnings, being just Gory Guerrero's son and having to pay his dues as people beat the ever-loving teetotal shit out of him in Mexico at spot shows and earning maybe $100, $150 just because he was Gory Guerrero's son, to teaming up with Art Barr. More on Art Barr as this review goes on. Oh boy, oh joy, oh bliss. Good old creepy Art Barr. Then he became Black Tiger. Then he competed in ECW. He competed in WCW, Cruiserweight U.S. Champion. He was able to achieve the pinnacle of success in WWE because Eric Bischoff decided to put that glass ceiling on him. He broke through it and overcame numerous addictions, numerous near-death experiences, and became WWE Champion, defeating the Beast, the Brock Lesnar in the Cow Palace in front of his brother, his mother, his sister too. Then on November 13th, 2005, Eddie Guerrero's life was cut short. He lived a lot, for good and bad, in 38 years, and coming up on 19 years, it is still hard to believe it's hard to believe he's gone, guys. Let's go. I'm John Rentham with my review of WWE on A&E Biography, WWE Legends on Eddie Guerrero, Latino Heat himself, and those who are longtime fans of the channel will know no wrestler's death hit me harder than Eddie's. Because I remember growing up watching Eddie. I do remember catching a little bit of his AWA stuff, and especially catching, I had a buddy who was able to he got the pay-per-view, I believe When Worlds Collide, and when him and Art Barr teamed up, and just getting to see Eddie, it was getting to see a little bit of ECW, but especially getting to see his stuff in WCW. It was impossible not to be captivated, not just by his work, but by his physical charisma, and the fact that he could make you feel a gamut of emotions. I'm not saying Eddie was perfect. Eddie had his demons. He was open about his demons. And you have to wonder if he had gotten those under control, if he would have been able to continue to wrestle on and on and on and on. Would the beat not stop till the break of dawn? Probably not the best choice of words, given when he passed away. But yeah, Eddie Guerrero's death I'm going to try here, guys. I'm going to try. But honestly, when he passed away, I vividly remember I cried off and on for 3 to 4 days. Like when I worked, I didn't. I put on a brave face, but that's how hard it hit me. It hit a lot of people. So, also, in case you guys are wondering why this review's up like way later than when the show happened, one, I didn't know WWE and A&E were bringing back Biography. I didn't know that. So my DVR records new episodes, and I was like, oh, shit, I should get to this. I wasn't able to get to it till now. And the Ricky Steamboat episode is coming up less than 24 hours as I'm recording this. I will be reviewing that. I'm a little bit surprised that they decided to do more. The Ricky Steamboat one's going to be interesting, but this Eddie Guerrero one, it was mainly footage from that 2004 documentary DVD piece. Was it Cheating, Death, Stealing Life, the Eddie Guerrero story? Because I remember it had a lot of vignettes, had some good matches. I used to have it in my collection. I used to have a lot of DVDs in my collection, and I got rid of them because I thought it was a good idea, and also I needed money when I was moving out. But that being said, it was nice to see a lot of stuff of him driving around, telling his story, family, film, home movies. A lot of talk about El Paso, Texas, because that's where the Guerreros homesteaded. That's where Gory Guerrero promoted. They did talk about the El Paso Coliseum. I did not know that building was built back in 1942, when Zoe Stark was just getting started in her wrestling career. But my God, I mean, what a history that building has. It only holds 5,250 people, but what an atmosphere that must have been, even in the 70s and the 80s. So, the Guerrero family legacy, it encompasses a lot. Now, yes, Eddie was wildly successful. Chavo had some success. Poor Hector Guerrero, the gobbledygooker. Mondo, I remember seeing a little bit of Mondo, but Chavo Guerrero Sr., Chavo Classic for more, modern WWE fans, I guess, even though that was back in like 2003, 2004 that he came around, just for a brief stint. he was one of the first people to do the moonsault, the backflip and stuff like that. And it was mind-blowing to see. Him and Lenny Poffo. There were a couple others, I'm sure. But that was a big deal. And there were good talking heads here. I'll even say Michael Cole was a good talking head. Same as it ever was, once in a lifetime. That actually makes sense for Eddie Guerrero. Freddie Prinze Jr. talked about it, and it was nice. This also was clearly done a couple of years ago, and they just got around to it now. I mean, they even had Sasha there. They had Ric Flair there. They did, like I said, they had Bischoff, they had Undertaker, they had Bayley, looking as only she can look. They had Ray. Obviously, Ray would have to be involved in this. They had Dominic for a little bit, especially for the custody of Dominic storyline, which watched them run that back. Rhea Ripley and Liv Morgan, custody of Dominic at SummerSlam. How hilarious would that be? Lex Luger, I don't really know why Lex was there, because I don't recall Lex competing against Eddie much, if at all, in WCW. If he did, it must have been in 98, because I can't imagine they would have come across each other much in 99, because Eddie was out by Sold Out 2000, and Lex was going through his own stuff. Damian Priest, it was nice to hear from him. Hector Raycon, I believe is the name, or Rencon. I'm sorry if I got that wrong. He was good to hear from. There were a couple other talking heads as well. Heyman was great to hear from. So yeah, the old family photos and the family home movies. They did have 2004 interview pieces from the Cheating, Death, Stealing Life, the unaired footage. Eddie, his mom, Helinda, I believe, and Vicky, and Chavo and Mondo. I don't know if Mondo is still alive. I know Chavo still is. I know his mom isn't. My God, his mom was around when the Spanish-American War happened. I'm sorry. I'm trying to have some jokes and have some fun. But the AWA footage, the unseen, some of the unseen stuff, I did enjoy them showing more of, like, the Guerrero's training and the goddamn, bumps and the ring not moving at all. The canvas moved. That ring didn't move at all. That must have been goddamn hard. But they had footage from Juarez, Mexico, when Eddie was working in 1987. Where did they get this? That was cool shit. I don't know who the fuck he was wrestling, but that was cool shit. That was really nice. Talks about meeting Vicky. Gory wanted them to get married. Gory was in bad health. He died, I believe, the Tuesday before they got married. That's a shame. That really is a shame. But they show more old Mexico and AWA footage. The Guerrero brothers are, I think him, Hector, and Mondo were on. It was him, Hector, and Mondo, or him, Hector, and Chavo, now senior, but Chavo at the time. I want to say it was on Super Clash 3. I know they weren't on Super Clash 4. And excuse me, allergies are a bitch, and also kind of trying not to cry talking about Eddie. But the teaming with Art Barr, read up on Art Barr as to why I feel he's a piece of shit and a goddamn sack of you know what, and I'm glad that he goddamn eroded. Yeah, let's just say he didn't treat women right. Let's just say that much. So they kind of skipped over that, which is probably good, because they would have had to have talked about Art Barr, even though that's where Eddie took the frog splash from, as a way to honor Art Barr. Even though the way Art Barr hit it, D'Lo hits it more like Art Barr, but I digress. He became Black Tiger in Japan. Eddie, not Art Barr. That would have been weird. And he was able to wrestle in a mask and not be Gory Guerrero's son. It worked for him. He ended up becoming lifelong friends with Malenko, who they didn't include in this, but then again, 2022, Malenko's been battling, I believe, Parkinson's, and also he's been working as an agent for AEW, and at least he was at that time. But ECW stint versus Too Cold Scorpio and Malenko, they showed a little bit of footage of that. And the Eddie chants, that started in Mexico, I believe, maybe El Paso. Eddie's not a word in Mexico, but Eduardo is. That's a name. I believe they must have loved Eduardo Carpentier. Butchering that name right there. WCW stint, he started on the October 2nd, 1995 Nitro. Bischoff, I'll create a cruiserweight division, which he ripped off from New Japan, just like he ripped off the New Japan, or the NWO storyline. I mean, I'm not saying that light heavyweights weren't something that WCW had done before. They did the light heavyweight division, and Brian Pillman was about it. I mean, they had others, and then Bill Watts got rid of it because Bill Watts didn't understand high-flying people, despite the fact that the Midnight Express and the Rock and Roll Express set the world on fire, and the Rock and Roll Express were high flyers. But the one complaint I have about this, it was a well put together piece. It was disjointed as far as the footage, because they would talk about Eddie, being successful in WCW. They showed his debut on Nitro, and then they would cut to him versus Ray at Halloween Havoc 97. Great match. But then they would go back and talk about him winning the U.S. title, winning the Cruiserweight title. One of the best matches of Eddie Guerrero's WCW run was against Dean Malenko, besides the Ray one, was against Dean Malenko at Starrcade 97, a fucking incredible opener. It definitely delivered, unlike the main event. But Eddie then got into drugs and booze because he wasn't paying the bumps and that kind of stuff. And they jumped around a little bit once they talked about his accident. I always saw his accident happen on on New Year's Eve of 1998. I guess it happened on New Year's Day, or the early hours of New Year's Day, 1999. Whatever, splitting hairs here. The important thing is Eddie survived somehow, even though he talked about the injuries. He came back way too soon. I do remember hearing about his accident, even though the internet was in its infancy, and I was talking to friends at school. Because we talk wrestling, because wrestling was really hot then. But back on June 21st, 1999. Now, he was in great shape. He worked hard. He also did some other stuff that other wrestlers did too, and I'm not knocking Eddie, but look at the physique. He was always in great shape, but come on. I have to be fair, even though he's one of my favorites. But he was still in pain. He OD'd a few times. I'm not going to get into too much of that or whatever. I will say that I do need to have I do need to kind of take it a little easy on how I am sometimes when people deal with addiction, stuff like that, because I've seen it firsthand, what it does to people. Sometimes I can be a little harsh. And then I have to remember, you have guys like Eddie and others. You have to try to be there for people, but Vicky did admit that it was really starting to take a toll. Eddie had a ceiling in WCW. Then they show him with the mullet throwing yelling at Bischoff, the whole coffee incident. That was back in 98 before the LWO was created and before the accident happened. Again, disjointed. They told Eddie's story of recovery and everything fine, but then they would disjoint it with the footage, and it bothered me. Bruce chimed in that, Vince said, well, he's really tiny. And yeah, Vince would say that. But, Bruce called him a Mexican Shawn Michaels as far as charisma and ability. That's pretty high praise. I'll give Bruce that much. He took it on the chin right there. Which one? I'll let you decide. But Eddie, Dean, Saturn, and wait, who else jumped with the Radicals? Oh, renowned murderer Chris Benoit. Right. They conveniently excluded him. Smart. And he got the Latino Heat line, or the inspiration from it, from the Birdcage. Which I had totally forgotten about that particular character. I need to rewatch the Birdcage at some point. It was weird. It was a play turned into a movie, and then I think they actually adapted the movie version back into a play, or maybe something. I mean, I don't know. I haven't watched it in years. The movie's almost 30 goddamn years old, and rest in peace, Robin Williams. But the storyline with China, it worked because Eddie was willing to let himself be made fun of. Working to get his GED, doing all this stuff. Wearing the fake bow tie and stuff like that. It was so bad, but it was so funny because Eddie could take this is one thing that came up a little bit later that Freddie Prinze Jr. and others talked about. That he was able to take the Mexican stereotypes that a lot of others put on, and he was able to make them entertaining and turn them back on people while also allowing himself to be the butt of the joke. And it worked. It fucking worked because Eddie could work and Eddie could talk. Mickey James chimed in a little bit. The stuff with China was good. it did allow people to see China in a bit of a different way, because China was seen as a big, buff, all that and everything. This was, Eddie was able to bring out, I guess, more of the feminine side of her. Something like, that's the way they made it seem. Even though they were kind of going that different direction, they tried to add more layers to China's character. Yeah, I hate to use the word character, but that's what she was presenting on there. Her persona, I guess. They skipped over the fact that he injured his elbow shortly after his debut in WWF. He was back in the ring really soon, but he had to have an elbow protective pad. He was really having issues. The drug and alcohol issues were affecting his family life. Vicky and him separated, because you got to keep them separated. Hey. From the offspring, no less. I'm trying, guys. I'm really trying here. He got sent to rehab after showing up on June 4, 2001. Messed up. And I think he had a couple stints in rehab. I think that Bruce said. And he did get fired briefly. Now, he did show up in, I believe, Impact Championship Wrestling. CM Punk talked about facing him, I believe, at an IWA Mid-South show. And he did actually appear, I believe, at the Vegas WWA show, the only U.S. show that World Wrestling All-Stars did. Watch those pay-per-views. They were dog shit, despite the talent. This is Vince Russo's fault. I will just say that. But he then talks about tattoos, like the cross and everything on his arm. Yeah, he got clean. He got religion. He traded one addiction for another, but it worked for him. It worked for him, so I really can't say that. I have made my opinions on religion known. He, according to Vicky, started getting clean, on November 9th, 2001, because he got fired really soon after. And he was like, okay, I need to get clean. I need to get set. And he won his job back, I think he was back by, April 1st, 2002. So that was about it. I don't know if him and Jerry Lynn ever faced off like they teased on WWA. But he feuded with RVD. I believe feuded Unforgiven. They feuded, I believe, at Judgment Day. And then they had a match where some idiot tipped over a ladder. I hope that guy got freaking drugged back out of the back of the arena and left in a dumpster, locked in a dumpster until he just stopped, breathing, because that's what fans like that deserve, drunk or not. You don't run in on wrestlers like that, or you might be like what happened with that guy trying to run in on the NWO. Nash and Hall kicked him in the head. That being said, Eddie and RVD had some pretty good matches. They skipped over him teaming with Benoit. Wonder why. They actually had a great tables match, I believe, against Bubba and Spike on Vengeance 2002. And then he started teaming with Chavo. That was more of a security blanket away, where he wasn't on a short leash, Bruce said, but he had eyes on him. And they won the tag titles in Survivor Series 2002. He renewed his vows with Vicky in early 2003. And he was doing good. He was able to turn these Spanish stereotypes around on people. The Lowriders, the Los Guerreros vignettes. Vince and the Lowrider was funny. What the hell's going on here? Oh, so this is what you people do. And I can see Vince saying that, actually. Among other things, that's really about the only time I'm going to do the Vince impression. Sometimes you just have to make fun of the pest that he is. And I hope he fucking goes to jail for all that he did. But the lie, cheat, and steal stuff, him, just throwing the title, throwing a chair at somebody and then pretending to be hurt. Remember Jesus and Carlito? Remember that terrible story? Carlito, a cologne, being involved in a stabbing storyline. That would never play out in real life. But Eddie doing this stuff, the clips are great. Cena, Michael Cole, they chime in. They don't really talk about the feud with the Big Show. Him covering Big Show in sewage. Weird. And then they skipped over his feud with Chavo, which I don't really understand. I'm not saying the match was great, but it was what it was. It at least showed that family could work together. And then his promo against Brock. And this was one of the best things where he talked about all his addictions. Brock is like, you're not fighting your addictions, you're fighting me. My addiction now is the WWE Championship. I get high on life. And Bayley was in attendance for the match at the Cow Palace, No Way Out 2004. I recently retro-viewed it, and it's a one-match show. card really isn't all that great up till that point, but the Cow Palace, great history of professional wrestling. Eddie winning there in front of his mother, his brother, his sister too, and all that. It was so good, so moving. Even Sasha chimed in. This must have been shortly after Sasha had left, or they got these comments in the can before she left, because they did show Ray later in 2022 visiting Eddie's grave. And so I'm thinking they just had this stuff in the can for a while. Huge pop for the win, though. They did skip over Goldberg, costing Brock the match. And he called Vicky to thank her for standing by him. Celebration on the following SmackDown. Mad TV, I totally forgot about that. Phil Lamar is the UPS guy. That was probably my funniest, or probably the funniest one to me. Yes, Stewart, look what I can do, was funny a little bit. Who remembers Mad TV, and what were your favorite skits? Answers in the comments. He wanted to get back to the people of Mexico and El Paso, get back to the fans, El Paso Coliseum. It was cool to see footage of a house show there. Batista talks having fun and working with him. But then Eddie was starting to have issues, and not because he was abusing drugs again. No, it's because his body was giving out. He was in pain. He was also juiced, and his heart couldn't take it. I'm sorry, look at his physique when he first came back in 2002. And look at how he was by late 2003. He was ungodly, beastly, and not in a natural way. And he wasn't the only one, but it was noticeable. Then we go back to Mania 20. Like, again, Batista stuff happened in like the late summer, early fall of 2005. We go back to Mania 20. And even Kurt talked about facing him and how tough, it was to see Eddie in pain. And Kurt was not exactly in the best shape either. But then Eddie ended up winning the title. And wait, who did he end up hugging at the end of that show, WWE? That being said, they talk about the feud with JBL. JBL talked about how Eddie really wanted to make him, into a star, which JBL needed all the help he could get. And he was, honest to God, even though his title reign wasn't all that bad, he was really a broken down worker at that point and really was a better tag worker. Nevertheless, they skip over the Judgment Day blade job where Eddie practically bled enough to fund a blood bank for about 2 days. And he didn't do well. He wasn't doing well. Like, the feud with Ray, he was doing his best. They were doing the vignettes. Dominic talked about, the custody of Dominic ladder match. They skipped over my favorite line of the whole thing where Vicky didn't run out on time and Eddie had to fumble the stuff and then Ray kicked the ladder match and Eddie's pounding the ground. Where the fuck was Vicky? And it was so great. But then, boom, they go right to... They skip over all the stuff with Batista. After briefly mentioning it before going back to Mania 20. And then they talk about Eddie's death in November 13, 2005. It's a date that is seared into my fucking brain. I do vividly remember, and at the time, friend is no longer my friend now for good reason. And at the time, girlfriend ended up being my longtime girlfriend who... Let's just say not the nicest breakup, but we ended up coming to an agreement nevertheless. I do appreciate the good times, and you know what? Hey, people grow apart, and it is what it is, and trust me, it's better that we just got to talking rather than being together. That being said, I still remember her being there because I legit did cry off and on for like 3 or 4 days. The SmackDown tribute show, the Raw tribute show. I think I watched that Survivor Series, and I don't even think I was not doing well. And they did skip over Eddie's in Hell, that whole thing with Orton and Ray. Orton didn't want to say that. It was heart failure. We know why. Ray visits Eddie's grave in 2022. Eddie's legacy. Truly one of the best. If I actually had to make a Mount Rushmore, Eddie would probably be on there. It'd be Brett, Randy, Eddie, probably Jushin Thunder Liger, if we had to be perfectly honest. I mean, that's just on top of my head. I mean, I could almost put Sting on there, but yeah, Brett, Randy, Eddie, and Jushin Liger for on. But like, had it not been for Eddie, I wouldn't have found WCW nearly as entertaining, even though there were some great talents. I miss Eddie to this very goddamn day. I'm sure a lot of people do too. And Eddie chants anytime a frog splash is hit, or people kind of channel the Latino heat and the lying and cheating and stealing. It's just done with a wink and a nod, and it's good shit. So yeah, in closing, messy with the footage and stuff like that, but I miss Eddie. Many miss Eddie. Rest in peace. I don't know how long he would have wrestled. Maybe Mania 25 in Houston. It would have been a nice send-off. But even if Eddie had not had the heart failure, had been able to keep wrestling, would Eddie have wrestled much past another couple of years? Probably not. But he still would have been able to live on. Maybe he would have been able to reel Vicky in before she went off the deep end. That being said, rest in peace, Eddie. What is Eddie Guerrero's legacy to y'all? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Ritlin. I'll see you soon.